I thank the lady for leading us. Without objection, Mr. Roy will be permitted to participate in this hearing. The chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. On the third day of this administration, January 23rd, 2021, the White House sent an email to Twitter. The email said this: wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process for having it removed ASAP, in all caps. That third day, what did that tweet say? Tweet from Mr. Kennedy said this: Hank Aaron's tragic death is part of a wave of suspicious deaths among elderly closely following administration of the vaccine. He received the vaccine on January 5th to inspire other Black Americans to get the vaccine. Now, what's interesting about the email that the White House sent to Twitter is the subject line says, flagging Hank Aaron misinformation. Now, misinformation is when you don't have the facts right. You're saying things that aren't true. But when you look at Mr. Kennedy's tweet, there was nothing in there that was factually inaccurate. Hank Aaron, real person, great American, passed away after he got the vaccine, just pointing out facts. And yet the White House on the third day was actually 1:04 a.m. on January 23rd, 2021, 37 hours into the administration, they were trying to censor Mr. Kennedy. I find that interesting, the irony here, trying to censor the guy who's actually their Democrat primary opponent. Go figure. 3 months earlier, the FBI helped censor our second witness, Miss Morris's story. Her story in the New York Post about emails on the Hunter Biden laptop. And we know the FBI censored her because of work this committee has done to uncover what happened, and because of our third witness, Mr. Sauer, the lawsuit that he argued on behalf of Louisiana and Missouri in federal court, in a case that they got the amazing ruling from on July 4th, just 2 weeks ago. You go back to, in the course of that investigation, course of that lawsuit from Missouri and Louisiana, Yoel Roth, former head of site integrity at Twitter, in his sworn declarations, it's brought out in that lawsuit, in his sworn declaration in front of the Federal Elections Commission, he said this: during weekly meetings, federal law enforcement agencies communicated that they expected hack and leak operations before the 2020 presidential election, likely in October. These expectations discussed throughout 2020 were discussed throughout 2020. I also learned in these meetings that a hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. Now think about it. Weekly meetings throughout 2020, hack and leak operation in October involving Hunter Biden. 5 key things they pointed out throughout that year. And guess what? It all happens. It happens just like they predicted. How did they know? How did they know it was going to happen like that? Because they had the laptop. They had the laptop for 10 months before Ms. Morris's story on October 14th. Her story breaks that day. That same day, October 14th, 2020, Twitter meets with the FBI, specifically the Foreign Influence Task Force at the FBI. Later that same day, again, the day her story comes out, Facebook also meets with the FBI. The head of the Foreign Influence Task Force now is Laura Demlow, and this committee interviewed her just 3 days ago. And what an interesting interview that was. We asked her about these meetings. She stated in the first meeting, the FBI and Twitter, in that first meeting, she said someone from Twitter asked, is the laptop real? They asked the fundamental question. That story had broke. It was big news. Twitter asked the FBI. They're right there in front of them. They've been prepping them for a year. They asked the FBI, is the laptop real? Ms. Demlow conveyed to the committee this week, an FBI agent answered, yes, it is. Another FBI agent, a lawyer, very quickly followed up with no further comment. So again, here's the scenario. The story breaks. Twitter's meeting with FBI later that same day. Someone from Twitter asks, is this story real? Is the laptop real? The FBI answers yes, and then quickly followed by, again, all this conveyed by Ms. Demlow, the FBI lawyer says no further comment. In the later meeting with Facebook, again that same day, the FBI was asked the same question, and this time, the FBI gets their story straight. Ms. Demlow is the only one who comments, and she says no comment. Obviously, by the second meeting, the FBI had coordinated, and she conveyed this in her deposition, that they had deliberated what they were going to respond when that question was asked. So think about this. After being repeatedly told a hack and leak Russian info operation is coming for a whole year, it arrives on October 14th in the form of Ms. Morris's story, an accurate story. Our government knows the laptop is real. They know it's not a Russian information op, and they know the story is true. But when directly asked, they say no comment. And of course, Ms. Morris's story is censored. Visibility filtered, the term that the tech companies use. No, you can't direct message, you can't send it. Keeping the American people from valuable information just days before the most important election we have, election for commander-in-chief, election for the presidency of the United States. That's why Ms. Morris is here today. She knows what it's like to be censored. It's why Louisiana and Missouri filed the case. It's why Mr. Sauer argued the case. And frankly, it's why Mr. Kennedy is running for president. It's to stop. Help us expose and stop what's going on. This alliance, big government pressuring private entities to censor Americans. I think in Ms. Morris's testimony, which I read this morning, big tech, big government working together, big media working all together to censor American speech. So we look forward to your testimony over the next few hours. But I will tell you this, just get ready. I think these guys, Ms. Morris, get ready. Last time we had a journalist sitting there, they were trying to get them to divulge their sources. So be ready, but I know you can handle it. We appreciate your willingness to come forward, and we appreciate your willingness to fight for the First Amendment. With that, I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
I want to enter one thing to the record, Mr. Chairman.
Can you do that after? Just yield, then we'll enter it in the record after.
Sure.
Director Wray, did the FBI ask financial institutions to turn over their customers? Yield the time to me. Did the FBI ask financial institutions to turn over their customers' debit and credit card purchase history in the Washington, D.C. area for January 5th and 6th, 2021?
I don't know the answer to that as I sit here right now.
Well, we do, because Bank of America gave it this email from the FBI to Bank of America.
Well, I am aware that Bank of America provided information to the FBI, but what communications occurred between the FBI and Bank of America about it?
Let's read it. To recap our morning call, we are prepared to action the following threshold. Customers transacting debit card, credit card, Washington, D.C. purchases between 1/5/21, 1/6/21. That's scary enough. But then the next bullet point's even more scary. Any historical, capital letters, all capitals, any historical purchase of a firearm. You guys asked financial institutions, at least Bank of America, we think more. Did you guys ask them?
Again, I don't have the full sequence of the back and forth. You've got one, looks like you've got one email that I haven't seen before here. So I don't know that I have the full exchange that this.
Well, does this email trouble you as much as it does members of the Judiciary Committee? That the FBI is asking for every single, we had members of Congress here that week. First time they're getting sworn in as a new member of Congress, their family in town, and you're sweeping, and they may happen to be a customer of Bank of America, and you're sweeping up every debit and credit card purchase of their family who are in town that week because their husband or their dad or their mom is getting sworn in as a new member of Congress. And then you're also saying, overlaying that information with, did this person buy a firearm?
And the question is?
I'm just nervous about that. Are you nervous about that?
As I think I've testified before, my understanding is that our engagement with Bank of America was fully lawful, but that we recalled the leads that were cut to field officers.
If it's lawful, that was my next point. If it's lawful, why did you say we're not going to use these leads? That's what Mr. Jensen testified to when we deposed him. The director of the terrorism unit at the FBI, that's what he testified to. Why did you not use the leads if it was lawful to get the information?
Well, there are.
Chairman, it's 1 minute and 18 seconds over time.
There are plenty of times where there are things that we lawfully can do, but that we decide is better that we not do. And I think that's what happened.
The idea that Mr. Massey said earlier, that this is lawful, that you can ask this is scary. This is something else we're going to have to change. With that, I would yield to the gentlelady recognize the gentlelady from, we got a unanimous consent request from Mr. Moore.
Mr. Chairman, yes, the Wall Street Journal article I'd like to enter into the record says Republicans eye sweet home for new FBI headquarters in Alabama.
All right. Without objection, the chair now recognizes the gentlelady for Texas for 5 minutes, and then we'll take a break, Director.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Director Wray, for your presence here. Thank you to the men and women of the FBI in particular for the work that you've done on gun violence and as well the work that you've done in keeping Americans safe. Let me very quickly move on some issues that have been made a chief part of the work of our friends on the other side of the aisle. Republican members of this committee have spent much time of this Congress claiming that various aspects of the U.S. government have been weaponized against the American people. Director Wray, are you or your staff or auxiliaries weaponizing the FBI against the American people?
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much. Let me thank you as well for your civil rights work and emphasize that in addition, there have been representations that the FBI exaggerates domestic terrorism reports or data. Certainly, January 6th had its many different storytellers, but that was an act of domestic terrorism. I don't know how you could have exaggerated that as evidenced by the special congressional committee we had. But let's just think of domestic terrorism as it relates to the good men and women of our law enforcement. Take an example in February 2020 in Texas, where a white supremacist was engaged in conspiracy involving swatting, a harassment tactic, and all of the emergency services showed up over and over again. Does domestic terrorism impact negatively and dangerously on America's law enforcement and first responders?
Absolutely. And sometimes law enforcement are themselves the intended victims or targets of domestic violent extremism.
Though you have good, committed individuals, does the critique is legitimate? That's our job. Does the constant condemnation impact on morale of FBI personnel or those trying to join the FBI?
Well, look, our people are human beings, and nobody likes to see the organization they've dedicated their careers, really their lives to, unfairly criticized. But I will tell you, as I said in my opening statement, that the good news is our people are also tough and resilient. Our attrition is in the low single digits and would be the envy of almost any employer, and our recruiting, unlike what's happening in law enforcement more generally, is actually up very significantly.
Thank you, and I look forward to it being diverse. Let me start with our whistleblower journey here. Are you familiar with FBI Special Agent Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah. The committee heard testimony that Mr. Seraphin was suspended after he mishandled his service weapon and then said he wanted to use 2 female FBI executives as shooting targets. That was testimony of Jennifer Moore, HR under Human Resources under oath from the FBI. Mr. Seraphin describes himself as a congressional whistleblower, but committee Republicans will not tell us whether he has been in contact with them. Are you familiar with former FBI agents Garrett O'Boyle and Marcus Allen?
Again, I'm familiar with the names.
Thank you. O'Boyle was suspended for accessing information about an ongoing case and then leaking to the press, and Allen was suspended for interfering in the investigation of a January 6th suspect. Both Allen and O'Boyle testified before the Weaponization Committee in May. Were you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
I think they are clearly there for all friends and family to see. I assume they wanted to be seen. Do you know who Kash Patel is, if you know?
Yes, I know who he is.
He's an aide to President Trump, isn't he? Or was an aide? Or is an aide to President Trump?
Well, he was an individual who served in a number of different roles, both up here on the Hill and in the executive branch.
Thank you. Here's another picture. It's the checks that Seraphin sent to both O'Boyle and Allen. Each check was for $255,194. Let me say that again. These men were paid $255,194 after they testified as so-called whistleblowers. And it should be noted that it says here, as it says, for holding the line. Director, at the time that Seraphin and Patel gave Garrett O'Boyle and Marcus Allen these checks, do you happen to know if they were still employees of the FBI?
I can't speak to that. I don't know the answer.
If they were, 5 CFR 2635, and I'd appreciate if we could get an answer in writing after you go back, whether they were or not, prohibits FBI employees from accepting cash gifts, doesn't it?
Well, there are a whole number of rules that would apply to this. Again, I don't want to weigh in on a specific personnel
But if
matter.
they were, that rule applies about cash gifts.
I'm not aware of a situation in which they could appropriately accept cash gifts.
Just generally, if that applies to FBI agents about not taking cash gifts, is that correct?
There are definitely rules that apply to special agents accepting cash gifts.
Let me just finish this. Can you explain why an FBI agent should not receive cash? But let me move to one that I think is extremely important. Mr. Chairman, just a moment. And here is what I think is most interesting piece of this whole puzzle. O'Boyle and Allen are represented by an outfit called Empower Oversight. Empower Oversight is run by former Republican staffers. Do you know who else Empower Oversight might represent in any way?
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Let me just
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you so very much.
Respond.
Thank you. The so-called IRS whistleblower who Jim Jordan had relied upon. But does anyone need any further proof that these allegations are ginned up, corrupt political stunts advanced by those who don't want to see us follow the law? Finally, Mr. Chairman, here's another person who wants to join you on the 702, but the FBI has begun major reforms, and I think we should recognize that. You've been very kind. I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields back. I would just point out, my guess is they got the money because they wanted the money because they had to they're trying to feed their family.
They actually haven't received the money. I have unanimous consent request.
Đường về thôn em duyên dáng bên ven sông con thuyền xuôi mai, nhịp cầu băng qua men lối đi quanh con ngõ hoa nối dài. Nhà em cuối sớm ghép đôi mái tranh nâu trắng cài trước sau, có tầm mến thương dâu, có trầu vấn vương cao và đào tơ thơm ngát ngát hương trinh ban đầu. Đường về thôn anh con sáo ru êm trên đồng xanh lúa, nhịp cầu băng qua đưa lối dân rêu xưa thăm hoa bốn mùa. Nhà anh mãi là tháng năm vẫn chưa nghe duyên tròn ước mơ, có dàn mướp xanh lơ, có hồ cá nên thơ, mà lòng quê vẫn hát bao câu mong chờ. Hội mùa lên tiếng ca góp tay ta cần lao. Ôi hai thôn giao đầu, nhịp cầu che bước chung êm vui dương bao. Tình ta lên bên rồi còn chỉ ngăn cách lòng, mà chưa trao giấc mơ xuân cùng nhau. Trời dâng lên trăng màu, bà con đang mong cầu rằng đôi ta sớm nên duyên ban đầu. Đường về hai thôn mai mốt đôi uyên ương qua cầu soi bóng, nhủ thầm sông ơi gương nước chưa phôi phai ta còn vui hoài. Trời quê bát ngát sẽ trông thấy tương lai qua tình lứa đôi, lúa đồng mãi xanh tươi mướp cà thắm nơi nơi, và vành môi trai gái hát câu ca yêu đời. Hội mùa lên tiếng ca góp tay ta cần lao. trai gái